The best of the week on Relevant Radio.
All right, here we go. Welcome to Marriage Unhindered. I'm your host, Doug Hinder, licensed marriage and family therapist. I think you're going to really enjoy today's show. I'm going to be talking with Conor Gallagher. Conor is the CEO of multiple businesses, including 10 books, which you're probably familiar with. He's the executive director of the Benedict Leadership Institute at the Belmont Abbey College. Today, we're going to talk about his most recent book entitled Well-Ordered Family. So many of the ideas in his book are tried and true business practices, like the SWOT analysis, which is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Jim Collins' good to great, big, hairy, audacious goals. SMART goals, which is SMART. Urgent versus important quadrant, the 5 whys. This is actually a workbook. It's actually, the cool thing is, he's taken these tried and true business practices and applied them to family life. He quotes some of my big business heroes from back when I was in the business world, guys like Peter Drucker and Edwards Deming. This book brought me back to my days as a guy responsible for employee development and leadership development training. So, plus I've always been a student of time management and workflow organization, those types of things. And this book nailed it. And you will pick up a lot of very practical tips today. Now, you might be wondering, you might be asking yourself, well, what qualifies Conor to write a book like this? Well, he and his wife, Ashley, have 16 kids. So he is in it. He is in it. And he appreciates the need for a well-ordered life. So, Conor Gallagher, welcome to Marriage Unhindered.
Thanks, man. It's a pleasure to be here. Doug, you know your stuff, man. Like you're just covering the business side. You got the marriage side. This is I'm impressed, dude. Way to go.
I appreciate
you for summarizing the book like that with your business background. That was awesome.
Yeah, no, I was like, man, I taught all this stuff for years in the business world, and I don't think I actually brought much of it home to family life, but you've distilled it down. And in a workbook form, like it's not just read it. It's kind of like read it and then do it. Like read on page 1 and do page 2, and you're going to like move your family forward. So I thought this was a phenomenal book, and I didn't get a chance to meet you in Indianapolis at the Eucharistic Congress, but I met some of your people there, I think, which is how I kind of found out about you and the work you're doing. So it's great to have you.
Well, thanks. I was, the way this whole thing kind of came about is kind of like what you were just saying about yourself. Okay. You did all this stuff professionally, right? You understood the SWOT analysis. You understood core values. You spoke the language of business efficiency. You saw it, but you didn't bring it home necessarily. And so here's the thing, Doug. It's like, I basically considered myself pretty dang good at business, running multiple businesses, consulting different businesses. And I was on my A game, and it was like, wow, Conor's not so bad at this. He's pretty good at it. Yeah. I was able to form teams, develop a vision, get operating principles that we really live by, rally the team, hold meetings, resolve conflict, have scores that we were trying to aim at, metrics of success. And then every day I would go home and I'm like a bumbling idiot. I have no idea how to do anything. And I was like the oldest of the children and just waiting for my wife to just tell me what to do. So, over time I started saying, why am I on my A game at work? And then the most important person in the world to me, my wife, sees me at like my C game, not even B game. Like she never sees what other people see. And so that kind of got my mind at least engaged with saying, how can I kind of be this visionary and this kind of operational expert, at least at home to some extent? So if nothing else, even if the dishes don't get done any better, even if it doesn't cut down on conflict with the kids, at least my wife will see me at my better self. So that's kind of how that all got started.
I love that. No, very true. I certainly remember the frustration of, like, how can I be successful at work and not at home? Anyway, that's why God gave us wonderful wives who can who can help us.
I know, and it's like you go home, and when you have a wife, especially a wife that's at home and like running the household so well, you don't want to come in and act like, oh, I'm the business expert. But one day I looked at her and she was like divvying out the chores for that night and telling one kid to sweep and one kid to do the countertops and one kid to do the dishes. And they were all fighting back, Doug, because they said, I did this last night. I did that the other day. And I looked at her and I said, you need some business efficiency up here because I can't just walk in and tell all the people to just do random things every day. You need to have a schedule of activities and a whiteboard that gives everybody clear goals and objectives. And she said, okay, Mr. Business, why don't you help here then? And I said, well, there you go. And so that we pulled out a whiteboard and we made a really good chore chart, which many families have a great chore chart in their home. But that was the very first like business tool that I brought to my house because she said, okay, smarty pants, do it yourself. And I did. And she liked it. And we kept going from there.
Well, the key is she liked it too, right? that helps a lot. So,
Absolutely.
So tell me about the book. I mean, I like it. But so you got 6 different components of a well-ordered family. Kind of walk us through that a little bit, could you?
Yeah. So I believe, Doug, that natural law is something written by God. It's on our hearts. Yeah. But I found that, I could pray my way all day long. But, as my dad always told me, he said, son, don't be so heavenly minded. You're no earthly good. Yeah. And he would say, God is not going to suspend the rules of economics just because you pray. But you have to also pray like everything depends on God and work like everything depends on you, or at Labora, like the Benedictine motto. So my point is I found that there are certain natural law principles in running any organization, taking it towards success. And that starts with vision. So that's kind of my first part of the 6-part system. You have to have a clear vision of where you're going. You have to have that visionary who's constantly like dynamically recharting the course because everybody gets off kilter and you have to keep aiming at that final goal. But then you mentioned Jim Collins. Yeah. He says that 1% of success is vision. 99% of success is alignment around that vision. And that's what we call unity. So It's one thing if I have a beautiful vision statement, but I got to get the team completely on the same page. So how do I get my kids, myself, my wife, and we're a team together, but how do we get the family to really understand, to be able to articulate and constantly look at the ultimate goal of our family? That's the lens through which we make decisions. So that's vision and then unity. And then the third and fourth part are closely related. That's systems and metrics. Now, systems can be anything from like the big overarching environment that you live in, your church community, your school community, your homeschool community, your work environment for mom, dad, kids, to these big macro environments. And you have to be the architect. You have to take control of that and not feel like a victim of the dangerous world out there. You have to construct your environment. Mom and dad out there, construct your environment. You're the architect. You're not a victim. If you don't like the social environment, the technological environment, the educational environment that your kids are in, have the guts to change it. You can change it. It is within your power. So that's systems. But then there's also little micro systems. That's getting the chores done. That's paying the bills. That's getting debt paid off. Those kinds of things. Yeah. Getting the laundry done. I mean, Doug, the dishes and the laundry in my house, it's like a NASA launch every day. I mean, that's how, it's hard. I'm sure. All right. So then metrics, that's keeping score. That's keeping score of little things that we want to track. I've learned, Doug, that every successful person out there, whether it's like an athlete, whether it's a world-class chef or a boxer or anybody or an entrepreneur, an investor, or a family, whenever somebody takes success really seriously, they start measuring things with precision. Yeah. The difference between world class and second class is sometimes inches when it comes to an athletic event or whatever. And so we have to figure out what is important in my family, what's important in yours, and we have to learn to measure those things. For us, we measure how many times a week we pray a family rosary, how many times a month we go to confession, what's our debt payoff schedule. I used to be fat and I'm not as fat anymore, and I got diabetes. So I've been losing a lot of weight and getting in shape. So on my scorecard is my body fat percentage. It's on the scorecard. All the kids see it, and I update it every 2 weeks.
That's cool. Now, do each of the kids have their own scorecard as well, or is it just a family metric primarily?
It's a family one because I have found that like if you get overly complicated, it like falls apart. If somebody feels empowered to do that, by all means do it. But we just kind of keep it simple so that it's not too many pieces. Yeah. And then the last 5th and 6th part are relationships and discernment, where we love the Greek temperaments. We love taking assessment tests to understand each other so that we can work through conflict better. And discernment is, how do you make decisions? How do you solve problems? There's a lot of tools out there in the business world to help you do that. rather than just carrying around stress. Most of the conflict in a family comes from like the inability to make good decisions. Well, I have tools that can help you become a decision-making, a problem-solving machine so that it's not stressful, it's not anxious, you're not kicking around these ideas over and over again. Paralysis by analysis, it happens to everybody. So these tools will help you put the decision issues on the paper, figure out the variables, make a decision, set it to the side, and move on with your life. So that's a summary of the 6-part system.
All right. So yeah, I don't even know where to start. I mean, I get excited about
that was a lot. I know, Doug, but you asked me to go through it.
I know. I get excited about all of them. You know, I mean, you're talking about metrics. That's a big deal. And we don't do metrics in family much, but I mean, you know, that's a Peter Drucker thing. And I'm a big Drucker guru, right? I mean, if it doesn't get measured, it doesn't, you know, nobody pays attention to it, right? You can't, you got to measure it if you're serious about it. How about the relationships thing? Because I think the whole idea, and we did a lot of, you know, the Myers-Briggs, and, you know, there's 15 different varieties of Myers-Briggs type instruments out there where you looked at personalities and temperaments, that kind of thing. We did a lot of that stuff in the work world. Didn't ever think to bring it home.
Everyone loves assessment tests. Everyone loves doing self-analysis. So when you do it, it's a great way to kind of celebrate each other's differences. Okay, God Almighty he scoured planet Earth to find out of the 8 billion people, the 2 most opposite people on the planet, and he chose my wife and I. That's what he did. And if you put us in a blender and you poured us out, we're a pretty good parent, you know?
Yeah.
But we got to be put together. So when we do these assessment tests, and I would bring these assessment tests home and I would take it with my wife, and then we'd have fun. She'd take it as if she was me, and I'd take it if I was her. And, you know, we're actually discussing things that very often would cause conflict because there's such differences, but it's a lighthearted thing and it's fun. And then we started giving a number of tests to the kids, to the older kids and then the younger kids. And a lot of these tests have like kid versions. So you're able to do these things and it's so much fun. Everyone likes it. It's great dinner time conversations. And then when somebody does something that really ticks you off, you're able to look at it and say, okay, this is somewhat the way God made this person.
Yeah.
I have to distinguish the sinner from the sin. Yeah. And I have to look that this is a God-given kind of response to stimuli, and I have to love and forgive and be merciful to this person. I think temperament tests really, really help a person do that. That's why I focus so much of it on relationships.
Yeah, which I agree. I mean, oftentimes the question I ask, you know, couples when I'm working with them is, this problem you're having, is it a defect in your spouse or is it a defect in you? Right? So is it just that you're impatient and they've got their own unique personality and temperament and they're just doing life the way they do life, but it irritates you? There's nothing wrong with them. It just rubs you wrong. And if that's the case, then you need to develop some virtues like patience, you know, and kindness and those kinds of things. So God gives you the spouse you most need to overcome the defects that you really need to work on. And so that's how that works. And I think we need to focus on what's good and right in our children and not on the defects. And there is such a thing. I call it the Hank Gathers effect. Hank Gathers, that name ring any bells for you?
Sorry, no.
Gathers in 1990 was one of the top college basketball players in the country. He was like the Michael Jordan of his day. I mean, he had phenomenal talent. And in the middle of a game, he had a heart attack and died. And with all the talent he had one fatal defect, but it turned, he had one defect which turned out to be fatal. And I think other than that, though, with children, if they've got a defect that's going to really get in their way from being successful, you need to focus on that defect, help them overcome it. Other than that, if it's not fatal, let it go and focus on the positives and on the strengths that those children have, because God gave them some wonderful strengths. Listen, folks, well-ordered family, Conor Gallagher has a system for you that can work. All right, now, thank you, Conor. We'll have you back on. This entire episode of Marriage Unhindered is on the updated Relevant Radio app. The Relevant Radio app is completely free and updated daily with fresh articles, podcasts, and prayers.